We are recording. There you go.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order, the Six-Town Regional Planning Board District Regional Agreement Subcommittee meeting. Do we need to do a roll call vote? Is that what we do?
Yes, everything has to be roll call, and it's 6:33 for whoever's looking at the minutes there. At 6:33, call to order.
Jane Dutcher?
I don't think Jane's here.
Okay.
She is, but she's in the other room. Here she comes.
My timer went off. I had to go take care of it.
Ah, there you are.
Jane Dutcher is here.
Present.
Stefan Nestenpower? No, Stefan. Tupper Brown?
I'm here.
Greg Snedeker?
Here.
Michelle Girasso?
No, she's not here today.
Catherine DiMatteo?
Here.
Ginger Robinson?
Here.
Dorinda Bell Up?
Here.
Matt Lord?
Here.
Chris Hinkle is here. Alan Genovese?
Present.
Jessica Foote?
Here.
And Deb Pote.
And Tupper, I think, just joined us. Did you say Tupper? You did? Okay.
Yeah, Tupper's here.
And what about Kate? Who is that?
Kate Belsky is our person who's taking the minutes.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Alan, yeah, but I did want to ask a question. I don't have contact information still for Stephen Nestenpower. So if somebody can help me with that, I'd be happy to include him.
Yeah. And for the recording, Mac is present. Obviously, Jay Barry is present, and now Kate. So those are the other non-voting people.
Okay, I'm going to forward this. I'm going to forward Greg's email to you and to Stephen.
Great. Okay, that's appreciated. Thank you. So I think the minutes are next.
Yeah, moving on to approval of the minutes of April 24th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All right, do we vote on this?
Yes.
Yep. Is there any
a
discussion? Any discussion in terms of the minutes for anybody?
Just some people weren't members yet because we hadn't convened the whatever we are, SRPB. So STRPB, that's it. So I don't know if that matters. I mean, that's just me being nitpicky, but some of the people weren't yet members. So if we could correct that.
A motion to make that amendment and with that amendment, I should say.
Good.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right.
Oh. All right, so we've got the motion on the floor.
Do we want to
The
vote?
amendment on the
Yeah,
floor.
you just
Yeah.
say our names.
Yep.
Jane Dutcher,
Yes.
Tupper Brown,
Yes.
Greg Snedeker.
Snedeker, that's okay. Yes.
Michelle Girasso.
She's
Oh, you can just check with the people present. You don't have to go through all you can look at the screen and just go through the present. Yeah.
Catherine DiMatteo.
I don't know if I can vote, so.
You can.
Now you can vote.
We
Can
voted.
I vote on these minutes when I wasn't
Yes.
only observer?
Yes.
Yeah, so even if you weren't present at a meeting and there are minutes available, your vote means that you have read them, you're aware of them.
Okay. Yes.
Ginger,
Yes.
Dorinda,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Chris, yes. Alan,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
and Deb.
She's not here.
Not here. Great. Okay. That the minutes are approved. Or whatever we just voted was to amend the minutes. That was approved.
Mhm.
Okay. We're moving on to
Excuse me, I thought that we were voting on the amendment to the minutes. Did we vote to accept the minutes?
No, but we voted to approve the minutes as amended.
Oh, then I'd like to change my vote to abstain since I wasn't there.
Okay,
So noted.
Sorry, thank you.
Moving on to review and discuss the introductory paragraph.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And I thought we'd start with if I can find this, hang on a moment. Okay, I hope people can see that. Great. Every time something works for me on Zoom, I feel happy. So still getting used to this. So this is a good evening, everybody, and this is this is the third item on the agenda, and we're revisiting something we talked about last month. The introductory paragraph to the agreement, which is pretty straightforward. And I have nothing new to add to that. So in section 1, we talked a little bit about the K through 12 versus pre-K through 12. Remember that discussion, right? And so what we did is we got some advice from the Department of Education on this, and to cut to the chase, we're recommending that it be pre-K through 12, and I think a lot of people at the last meeting wanted to see it that way anyway. And I can read this to you. The reasoning is really quite short and simple. The agreement should articulate which grades the school committee has authority over. If a regional district is going to serve pre-K, we recommend it be listed in the agreement so it's clear which students, programs, and staff the regional school district committee has jurisdiction over. So that is what the department recommends, and that's what we recommend. I know that's not what we said at the outset, but we stand corrected and we think pre-K through 12. The other thing is that I remember a discussion at the last meeting about how extensive some of your preschool programs are. So that seems to be a good fit. And then this sentence at the end that we talked last time about, it's kind of helpful to have in the event that any of the laws are amended, so that the general laws shall control if there's a conflict between the agreement and the statutes. So I would ask if there's any questions and discussions, and then hopefully bring this to a vote of tentative approval. Turn it back to you, Chris.
I have a question.
Tupper.
Yeah, does the paragraph A mean that pre-K must be offered in the district?
No, it doesn't. It means that if you offer it in some sort of measured way or according to special ed policy, then that's why it's there. It doesn't carry any obligation to expand it or anything like that.
And you don't think the language shall include generally would be thought to mean that it shall include?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Shall include is
Well,
language.
it sounds like, I mean, presumably we anticipate that it would include 2nd and 5th and 7th grades, for instance, as an obligation of the district. But why doesn't the same thinking apply to pre-K in this language?
Well, because pre-K is to a large extent governed by special education.
And if I could add, Jay, you are required to have a preschool program for special education, as Jay was saying. So it's not a question of if you want to do it, you have to do it by special education laws.
And as the department mentioned, it's not, somebody has got to offer these programs, and it's not the towns that are doing it. It's going to be the regional district that does it, just as the two districts do it now.
Chris, I have a question.
I guess Matt has his hand up as well.
Yeah, I don't know how to get my, oh, there we are, down below.
Let's go with Matt. What do you got, Matt?
I have two questions because I feel like the answer to the last question was unclear. I don't know where you're at, Tupper, but so does paragraph A require the districts to provide pre-K as it is written for all students?
No.
Okay. Secondly, the last time we had this discussion around whether or not pre-K would be in here, one of the issues that was raised was grant eligibility, and we asked you to do research on that. Was there any follow-up done?
Yeah, there are no implications for grants with this. Okay. If you're eligible for grants, you're eligible for grants. That's not a factor here.
If I could figure out how to put my hand up. Which one
Alan?
of these icons?
Alan?
Yeah. So if we have a pre-K and there's funding implications, because Matt, our discussion, as he points out, was, could we get grants or not? And they said you can get funding from the special from DESI. Can we have if we have a half day pre-K, do we get half of the funding? Can we have like a half day and a full day? Do we have those options, and then they would fund accordingly?
Yeah, the answer is yes, Alan. I mean, that's policy, and that comes later. So
Okay.
this document is just laying out that the regional district is the district or the organization that's going to provide preschool programs.
All right, thank you.
Greg?
Greg or Greg?
Yeah, just a quick clarification. If we're going to vote to approve, are we voting in a sense to approve, to recommend this to the full board? I mean, the full board
No.
is the
No.
so we're saying that we're actually speaking for the full board on this?
No. So as we talked about with our process stuff at a previous meeting, okay, this is just for us, for the DRAS committee, okay? So as we go through the sections, a vote of, and that's why I emphasize the word tentative approval means that for us, it allows us to move on to the next section, and most of us agree that this is good. And it also means that when we're all done through all the sections, we're going to go back through all of it and have a final vote. And that's the one that goes back to the planning board.
Okay, great. That's
kind of a working step, if I can call it that.
Great. All right, thanks.
Jane?
There was some discussion last time. Am I on mute?
No, you're good.
Okay. That if the pre-K was in here, we would be obligated to transport every student in the pre-K program, regardless of whether they were there with an ed plan or just as an additional student. I don't know what to call them.
Yeah, the transportation issue can be dealt with through policy and through special education IEPs, really. So that there is no obligation to transport just because you have this in here. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't think I see any other hands.
Good questions.
Very. Okay. I don't know. Are we ready to at least preliminarily say that we're okay with this paragraph in this first section?
Are we adopting by motion and vote, or?
Yeah, the motion would be to vote tentative approval of the introductory paragraph in section 1.
So moved.
Second.
Jane?
A clarification. Is that motion for the introductory paragraph and section at 1A, or is it for the whole thing?
No, it's section 1,
All of section 1?
correct.
Okay, yes.
Well,
Greg?
is this by roll call? Yes, right? Yes.
Oh, did I need to say my name? Jane Dutcher, yes.
Greg, yes.
Yes.
Alan?
Yes,
Matt?
Yes,
Jessica?
Yes.
Ginger?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Dorinda?
Yes.
Cupper?
Well, I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting and I don't understand paragraph C. So I think I have to abstain.
Okay.
It's a pretty simple explanation, if you want me to jump in here, Chris. All it does, and all regional agreements have this, is that it articulates that the committee is authorized when it wants to and if it wants to initiate vocational education programs. That's all it does. It gives the district the opportunity to do so at its discretion. It's a good thing, in my opinion. It's a good thing to have there. Doesn't mean you're competing with Franklin County Tech. It just means that in the future, if there's some kind of special program you want to start, you can do it. At any rate, I hope that helped. If it didn't,
Yeah, I guess that's fine. I was concerned about how it works with Franklin County Tech.
yeah, no, it's not meant to compete with them at all.
All right, I'll change my vote to yes.
Okay. So that was for the introductory paragraph and section 1, or just the introductory paragraph?
No, it was for both. Yes.
Great. Do we want to move on?
We do. Yes. Okay.
Let's
So
move on to the review of section 2.
yeah, so we're into, an admittedly really substantive part of the agreement with section 2. So gonna try to find something. These are things that we all sent out to you. See if I can find this thing. No, that's
everyone looks so serious.
it's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah,
And it's too hot not to be serious.
yeah, I suppose. Yeah, tried opening the pool today.
Yeah, I am outside rather than in my closeted second story office, which is
Nice.
just unbearable at this point in time.
okay. Can people see that?
Mhm.
Great. So Mac and I wanted to go through a couple of background things, and this is one of them. And then we want to go through the edited version of section 2. So this is just a reminder about what the population was of the towns. And this is I don't know what to call it, a suggestion for seats on the committee, okay? So I think you have this document, most of you are familiar with it. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then there is this document. And these are the 5 acceptable and legal ways that you can elect members to a committee, regional school district committee. Okay. So this is also something we shared with you earlier, I believe. So the first thing is that you generally want to have people represent their towns, but you have to apportion the members by population pretty carefully. In fact, maybe I'll ask Mac to just walk through this quickly.
Sure.
Could you?
We believe there are really only 2 of these 5 that could possibly make sense to you. The first one, your communities, generally this only happens in the districts that have only two communities. So if each community has 3,000 people, then they could each have 2 school committee members, 3 school committee members, or whatever equal number. Sometimes we've worked with some school districts that one town is 80% has 80% of the students and the other 20%. So in that case, one town might have 8 school committee members and the other 2. But with your 6 communities and have such disparate populations, this is not very practical. As I think I mentioned a couple of meetings ago, in order to use this, you would probably have to have way too many school committee members to make it come out even.
Are you talking about option number 1?
1, yes.
I think that didn't the previous slide just show us that 13 members would be feasible?
Yes, but that's not that is not a direct reflection of your populations. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
They don't represent exactly the same percentages. So the other one that's like that is number 4, and that is you could weight the votes for each community. But as I mentioned there last month, most communities want to have at least 1 full vote. So I did some calculations, and it turns out that if Leiden, for example, would have 1 full vote, proportionally, there would need to be 22.7 votes on the committee in order to go exactly with the same proportion as your population, their 6-town population. So that really isn't a very practical thing, unless Leiden was willing to have like 0.2 of a vote or 0.3 of a vote. You could have a small number, and I'm assuming that probably would not be acceptable. So that's 1 and 4. So 2 is if you had district-wide elections, and again, you would have, let's say there were, let's just make it easy, say there are 2 or 3 people from each of your 6 communities that want to be on the school committee. There would be 1 ballot. They would have all the 12 or 15 names, and people would vote for those 15. In the top, if you decide to have 9 school committee members, for example, the top 9 would all get elected. So they could come, all those school committee members could come from 2 or 3 of your towns, and a couple of your towns might not have any representation. So the third possibility is, and that's one that Jay is going to go back to when I showed you that 13, that you can have district-wide elections, but you can choose in your regional agreement ahead of time how many people you want to represent each community. And that's what Jay's going to go back to, those 13. Whatever number is in the regional agreement, then again, if there are 3 people from each community running for school committee, and one community only gets 1 vote, then the person who from that community that gets the most votes would be on the school committee. But those 3 people are not competing with all the other people running for the school committee from the other towns. So Jay will go back to that. And number 5 again is if some other board is going to select your school committee. For example, the select boards could if they're obviously elected members, they could just choose who they want to represent them. And again, this committee can decide how many representatives you want from each community. So in our opinion, really only 3 and 5 are the only practical methods. And 5 is it's a philosophical issue. If you don't want your townspeople actually voting on your school committee members, you're going to let someone else do that, then obviously that's something that you can choose to do. But number 3 is, I guess, Jay, would you like to go back to the chart that shows the 13, and we can talk about that?
Yeah, I'm going to do that in a minute. I know we've got a couple questions. I won't forget
Okay.
you. Is that I want to speak to for a moment here about number 4. And I'm not contradicting Mac. I think that it's a bit of a challenge with a regional district with a lot of member towns, but weighting votes can work. The objection, as Max said, is often that a town has a member present and their vote is worth a third of a vote. And people sometimes are uncomfortable with that. But there are regional districts that use a weighted system. And but again, it's more likely 2 or 3. I worked with a district that had 3 towns and they had a weighted system and it worked okay. But again, this number 2, not often used because of what Mac pointed out with the possibility of a town not being represented, and residency requirements with district elections is in fact quite common with regional districts. So before I go to the next document, I see 3 hands up. Jane, I think you were first.
Well, I wanted to question number 5 because it says such as school board members. I'm assuming that's a typo.
No, it's not. What can?
Committee members would be appointed by school board members?
Yes. Okay. So
I thought last week when we talked about this, it was select boards or moderators.
no, it's any elected official. So for example, in the town where I live, the elementary school committee, which is not a regional committee, appoints members to the secondary regional committee. Okay.
Well, that's a little different.
Yeah, it is. But it also means that school committee people can be involved. Yeah. Yeah. You'd have to have 2 districts to make that work, right?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want school board members appointing their own membership.
Yeah, I understand.
So
people-
such as I would like to see more than a school board listed there.
Yeah, I understand. I think Alan was next.
Yeah, so just processing this with an example to see if I'm on target, because we're trying to keep it manageable. In the scenario of one of these scenarios, could there be 2 from each community that are elected within their community? So that makes 2 times 6, so you got 12. And then 3 members at large elections. Probably Montague, the bigger community, may have those, but they would be on the ballot for the other 3 seats. That gets us to 15. And would that satisfy? And you could do it, I guess, at the state elections whenever they have those potentially. But would that fit one of these models, Jay, that you have up there? So everyone gets 2, but it's neutralized because you then have an at-large election for 3 of them?
Yeah, so the way I hear that suggestion is that it relates to number 3. So you'd have district-wide elections, and the residency requirement would be that 2 people come from each town, and then you'd have 3 at-large seats, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the possible problem with that is that you've got a town with 5,000 people, okay? And they've only got 2 seats.
But they could have 3 because it's an at-large election. And if they have that many people,
Right, but
they might have 5.
the at-large, the nature of the at-large thing means that they don't get, they're not necessarily going to get the number of seats that they might like. I'm just theorizing this, okay? And I know that the Hart document did have an at-large. I think maybe one of these other districts has at-large seats, but you could do it that way. I'm just pointing out the downside. I think Tupper was
I would,
next.
Jay, if I could point out one other issue there, and that is, if everybody had two, that means that Leiden and Warwick would have 2 votes, and Northfield with almost 3,000 people and Berniston with 2,100 people would have the same 2 votes, because probably in that scenario, I would think that all 3 of the at-large people probably would get elected from Montague, as Jay was mentioning. So the other 5 towns would all have 2, even though they're quite different populations. So it's legal to do that. You could do that.
Yeah, okay. I think Tupper was next.
Yeah, I have sort of a series of questions. First of all, you were just addressing one of them relating to number 3, but more generally, I've never understood why in the, for instance, Gill-Montague Regional School District, we have district-wide voting. I've never understood why Gill doesn't elect its own people and Montague elect its own people.
Yeah,
And in fact, we in the past, when things were a little more tumultuous than they are now on the school committee, we had, instances of campaigning in the other people's town and carving up the other people's districts and all kinds of things going on. It just seemed like it wasn't terribly appropriate. So what is the reason for district-wide elections?
Well, the best answer I can give you, Tupper, is that it's one of the things that satisfies the constitutional requirement of 1 man, 1 vote. So when it's district-wide, it spreads the representation across the whole district. And in terms of the people who wrote this statute, they believe that that satisfies the requirement in some way when it's open to everyone.
All right, so you're saying as a matter of law, it has to be district-wide.
I missed that.
As a matter of law, you're saying these elections have to be district-wide.
They don't have to be, but if you choose 2 or 3, then it has to be district-wide. Yes, and that's statutory.
Well, I'm confused. What is there about number 3 that triggers that requirement?
It's that you're in both cases, there's a lot of discretion in terms of how many people you specify for each town. That's what triggers it in my mind.
That's what the statute says. In other words,
No,
it says if you don't do it by
that's just
population.
that you can go back and read the law if you want. That's just what I'm saying.
Tupper, this what you have in front of you is the law. This is word for word.
And so this has been written right by the state legislature to concord with what the state interpretation of the U.S. Constitution and the Supreme Court interpretation of the constitutional requirements for 1 person, 1 vote. You don't have to have district-wide if you proportion the number of representatives from each town in the district as in number 1. But if you set a number of representatives that's not proportional to the number of people in each town, then you need to allow the people from each town to vote for the representatives from the other town in order to maintain the proportionality of 1 person, 1 vote.
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, no,
I got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you, Matt.
May I continue just a bit though?
Sure.
As Greg knows, I'm a little confused about our role in all this. I was asked to be on a drafting committee, and now I'm finding that we're asked to make very substantive and often politically oriented recommendations, I guess they are, ultimately to the board. And I'm wondering on this issue, whether it would be more helpful to the board and also that has to make the decision in the end, and also more appropriate if we were to offer up 2 or 3 alternative approaches to this question of committee composition, and give them some choices to think about, and not simply a etched not in stone but in clay single proposal.
Yeah, so that question is a little bit beyond me, because it gets to the charge of the DRAS committee. It's my understanding this DRAS committee is charged with coming up with a draft of a proposed agreement. When this work is done, Tupper, the planning board does have the option of changing things or revising things. Okay, but as to the rest of your question, maybe somebody else can speak to it, but we're operating under the assumption that the DRAS committee wants to work through a proposed agreement.
Yeah, I as I said, I have a little bit of a problem with that, but go ahead and see if anybody else has any thoughts.
Okay, Dorinda?
In scenario 3, is everyone reelected every 2 years, or is it staggered? Are they 4-year terms and half the people are, well, like only half the people are being elected, or everybody?
Yeah, usually, as you'll see in the next document, the popular option is 4-year terms that are staggered. Okay, so that the elections are every 2 years, and they kind of half the people run one 2-year segment and half the next, if that makes sense.
Okay, and do we need to put in any language about revisiting this number? What, say Northfield made a giant housing complex 50 years from now and their population changed dramatically. Do we need to put in language for like revisiting the numbers?
Only if, depends on which option you choose. So if you're going to choose number 2 or number 3, the answer is no, you don't. If you choose number 1 or number 4, then you do need to pay attention to population changes.
And Jay, could I add to that?
Yes, you may.
If you do choose 2 or 3, you can change it if some town explodes. But it means having another committee like this and revising the regional agreement and to whatever you think is appropriate, or whatever the people at that time think is appropriate. But it does not require you, as Jay said, to change it, but you obviously can if you want to revise the agreement.
Yeah, so it'd be an amendment. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Alan.
Well, no, I just was going to say that, it is common that the, school committee, as issues like this arise, they then work on an amendment and bring the amendment forward to the communities to vote on.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. Greg?
Yeah, I mean, 3 seems to be, I mean, that's what Gil Montague has. That's their process of elections. And I don't know what Pioneer uses. I'm assuming it's probably the same, that it's 3. But can anyone speak to that?
Yes, it's 3.
Yeah.
And there are some people who don't like that because it means that you're voting for all committee members. If you live in Bernardston, you're voting for Northfield members, Leiden members, Bernardston members.
I mean, it's by law. I mean, there's nothing we can do, but it just seems like that is the number 3 is what both districts use now. So it seems like it would be familiar to, to all the towns.
Yeah. Okay. Jane, do you still have a question, or are you
No, but I like 5 best.
okay? Yeah. It might help if you can take that hand down so that I know you don't. There you go.
Yeah.
Alan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. And it's kind of a little bit of a follow-up from from Jane's comment, because I'm trying to sort this out. I was on the Pioneer School Committee like in the 90s and then on it again recently. And my recollection was that there were a couple members that were of definite on the ballot in their town, and they got on because of the the residents in that community voting. And I want to say one year, I was the at-large person, and I was being voted on by the all towns, all 4 towns. And so one of them was like carved out for that. If that was true, I think the criticism was, well, the residents may have wanted somebody else for that seat, and the other towns were had more weight, and they were actually voting for someone in let's say from Warwick that got the minority vote in their community, but they got the majority when all the towns voted. Jane, can you clarify that? Because that's
Yeah,
the way
that's why
thought it worked.
that's why I raised my hand.
Yeah, so if you
want to
could,
serve on the Pioneer, if you want to serve on the Pioneer District School Board, you need to take out election papers in each town. And you are on the ballot in each town.
that's correct.
Okay, there's no at-large. This is what happens with every seat on the board. And each town has the same number of seats.
Alan, could you sort of restate your question?
Yeah, because my recollection was I didn't take papers out in any of the other towns. Well, when I was at the at-large, or I thought I was.
There's never been an at-large, Alan. There's
Okay.
never been an at-large. Look at the district agreement.
Okay, so the 3 members at from Warwick all got elected from Warwick.
No.
And they also got votes in the other 3 towns as well.
Okay.
And the total of those votes is what, if there was a contest in Warwick for an open seat, then that seat was voted in each town. And whoever got the most votes got on the school committee for Warwick. I know one year, one particular town in the district, the incumbent running to continue on the committee did not get the majority vote in that person's own town. But the total of the 4 towns, that person won. So that's a situation that I never would have thought of that if I hadn't seen it happen.
Okay.
And I
think we
remember
had that in Guild
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay. So all
Yeah.
kinds of different eventualities can happen with elections. That's just the way that. But I still, Tupper, you have a question?
Yes, it's sort of a little bit off the point, but I'm just curious as to whether there's ever been consideration of apportionment of the school committee composition or members by student population as opposed to population at large.
That wouldn't satisfy the constitutional requirement because they're not voters, they're not constituents. They are, excuse me, they are part of the population, but it's not one of the 5 options that the statute outlines.
All right, thank you.
And Matt.
Could you provide some detail why you feel that number 1, according to portioned according to population, is not a viable choice?
Well, at the outset, and when I show you the next document, I was going to say this over again, but this is all up to you guys. This is your decision. So if you like one of these options, then
I understand that, but both you and Mac have been pretty clear you don't feel it's viable. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh, okay. Well, I think Mac has done more background on that than I have. Mac, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So number 1 basically says
He's fine. I got
that
plenty.
everybody on the committee has to have a full vote. And that's what I was saying before. In order to do that, if Leiden, for example, has a full vote, in order to do it proportionally with Montague being so much bigger, there would have to be a huge number of school committee members to make that work.
You have a
So-
napkin?
So we have a document that has a proportional
Bob,
representation with
napkin?
13 school members. Can you describe how that?
That
works?
was, Matt, that is just a model that we put on the sheet. That's all it is. Okay.
Is it mathematically, does it fit the legal requirements?
It fits number 3.
But it does not fit number 1.
No.
Right.
I had asked you guys to see if you could find a model that fits number 1. Did you do any work on that?
I thought that Mac did the math on this and it
I
results
did,
in
I
a very
did not
large.
carry it
committee.
out. I would guess there would have to be 40, at least 40 school committee members in order to make that work, to have Leiden and Warwick each have a full vote and do it proportionally with all the rest of the population. It would be a huge number.
I'm really disappointed that we're having this conversation and guessing at what the proportional representation is.
Well, if I may ask a question to Mac and to Jay, and if I could, I'll explain it as I have understood you to explain it to me, and you can tell me if I have a good enough understanding, because I think I understand what Matt is missing. In order to proportional to population, to have where every member has one vote and not have a difference of 10% or more, like one town can't have the difference of 10% or more than another town. So you'd have to have a large number of committee members for that. And so we could do the math quickly, but I just back of the napkin, I concur with Mac's ballpark figure that it's a high number of committee members, because the difference between Warwick and Montague in population is very large.
So again, the opposite of that is number 4. In order to have fewer school committee members, you could weight the votes and then you could have fewer members, but that means that each member has some proportion of 1. Some member might have 2.2 votes and some member might have a 0.3 vote, as Jay said before. So that's the 1 and 4 kind of go together. But 1 is if everybody has a full, at least everybody has a full vote. And Chris, that was a good explanation. Yes.
Yeah, no, I understand the math here. I'm just disappointed it hasn't been laid out for us.
Do you want the numbers?
Yes, please.
Leiden and Warwick 1, Bernardston 3, Northfield 4, Gill 2, Montague 11. Check my math.
What is that
That's pretty
total,
close.
Jamie?
5, 6, 17, 18, 22.
That fits with what Max said for number 4, which I was figuring would be the easy way. There should not actually be any difference between 4 and 1 at the end of the day. It's the same type of thing. It's just whether you're fractional or whole. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Right.
However,
you-
there's
if-
an even number of members,
Yeah.
so we're going to add one someplace.
Yeah, I think Montague's might even be closer to 12 people.
I just did the math, and if you
Yeah.
take Warwick 780, it's not.
Yeah, well, I took the
980.
smallest number and it's a little more than that. But anyway, it's a big committee. So if you're interested in that, we can bring it back to you. But 22 people on a school committee is a pretty large board. I think I don't know who's first, so I'll just take Ginger next.
I mean, maybe you covered this and I missed it. I mean, I have a couple of things here. Can there be a minimum? If we go with number 1, can there be, each town has a minimum of, I would say maybe 2. I mean, I think what my concern is that number 1 seems the most politically acceptable, I think, or most likely to pass, I would say, in town, maybe in Bernardston too. But I do see the problem with a big committee. None of these seem sellable to me, to the town. They don't, I'm trying to work through it. I just don't see, and I don't want to be negative. I want to find some solutions here. But I'm hearing myself tell the town of Leiden, 1.2 something votes. And, people are not going to like that.
No, I don't think it should be weighted.
Say that again. Say that again, Jane.
It should not be weighted.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like maybe weighted. I'm not. Or a minimum of, can we have a minimum? Each town have at least a minimum of 2 votes?
If you use the first option and you give each town 2 votes, then
44 members, according to Jane's.
Yeah, then the numbers go up even more, Yeah.
Jay, I wonder if it would be helpful to show the chart with the 13 on it again and just explain your rationale, our rationale for how we got to there.
Well, it's really about, well, I don't want to cut the discussion off here, Mac, about these options.
Yep.
I'm very interested in the rationale for that. I'd love to hear that.
We'll get there. I think Tupper had a question and then Alan.
Well, more of a comment, really. This discussion recently is, I think, highlighting the extent to which a decision on this issue is a highly political one. And I'm just very confused about how the planning board, which has to make this decision ultimately, can do so in a sensible and fully informed manner without having the kind of discussion that we're having here today. And in other words, if we simply give them a single suggestion, I don't see what's going to generate this kind of discussion about the possibility of alternatives. And that's why I again ask if we shouldn't provide them with alternatives and let them understand that there are different ways of going about this and different reasons, that some are more acceptable than others in some towns and so forth. The idea of us going through all of this and coming up with what seems like the best possible solution, probably not perfect, and not giving them the opportunity to understand the background, I think is probably a mistake.
Well, I don't know that the planning board wouldn't go through all of the background on this. I would hope that they would. Alan, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, so I have 2 I only had 1, but now I have 2. The first one is just to answer this. We had a planning board that had representation of school committee and town representatives from the towns, and we've been working on this for 4 years. And when we came to the point now of going forward with after actually crafting a regional agreement, the planning board, decided that we wanted to have representation from getting into the layers of this onion from each town. We wanted finance committee, select boards, members, whatever, but we wanted the towns to recommend someone to people from their community to the planning board as a recommendation, and then the planning board appointed them. Because we're getting into the nitty-gritty and we're having these conversations, this is exactly what we wanted. We wanted to hear diverse ideas. We wanted to hear, hopefully we can reach a consensus, and then we move on to another item. And we're having this work done at a planning, at a subcommittee level, because the membership is smaller. We can get into the weeds better. And we would be then, after hashing this through, be making a recommendation to the planning board on each of these items as we go through. The planning board may have questions about this. Some items they may just think this makes sense and support, and others they might want to go back to the drawing board, or maybe even have a subcommittee to look at a particular issue a little more. But this is the process that we laid out. And I think it's a viable one, and I see it unfolding as the way we intended. Everyone from the communities, which has a vested interest in the best education for kids, as well as the financial part being represented on this subcommittee. So, so that's it on why we are here and why we're doing this work. The part about the weighted vote, I can speak from experience. When I was at Mohawk as a superintendent, they had 24 members on the school committee. And I remember saying at one of the meetings that they were dysfunctional. It was really, really difficult to get things done. We had it passed in all the communities to at least reduce that number. But we had a weighted vote system. I would literally sit there with a calculator as when we took votes and would calculate what the votes were on a particular issue. And you could have a majority of people be defeated because of the weighted vote. It just didn't make a lot of sense, and it adds a lot of confusion to it, particularly when it says, 14 people voted this way and 8 people voted the other way, and the 8 people prevailed. So it's just confusing. It's to me, it meets the requirement, but it's to me antiquated. It just doesn't make people feel good when they vote and they're worth 1.1 or whatever fraction is compared to others. So that's my opinion from experience. I will leave it at that.
I think that I'll go back to Dorinda. Muted. There you go.
Oh, me?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I just raised my hand. No, I think we have to be realistic about the numbers. It may seem like one person is not enough people, but I'm looking at our numbers, and if Leiden's contributing less than $1 million and we're contributing over $12 million, it seems like a 1 to 5 is very generous and appropriate.
Jane, I think your comment is next.
Well, I wanted to comment on the size of the committee. One advantage to having more members on the committee is that every member doesn't have to serve on 3 or 4 or 5 subcommittees, which is the case right now at Pioneer. There are advantages to a larger committee, and that's one of them. You don't have to choose 3 subcommittees to serve on. You can choose 1, maybe 2.
Okay.
I think we should think of those kinds of things also. The 6-town committee has had 3 representatives from each town from day one. 2 from the town, 1 from the school committee. So they're not exactly a small committee either. 6 towns times 3, 18. And then they always include Irving.
Okay.
I don't think that, if you were talking about 50 members, yes, I'd have a problem with that, but I don't have a problem with what we're talking about here. And I still like appointing them by town officials. I think
Chris?
also it would be helpful if we decided which one of these we could eliminate and then continue to discuss the rest. Because we can talk for 3 or 4 weeks here before we get to a consensus on the one, but we might be able to come to consensus on what to drop much sooner.
Okay. I think Chris was next.
Sure. I'm just going to relate my point of view, which is, a fresh, point of view. I'm not experienced in a lot of this stuff, but it seems to me that the numbers are stacked against us in the fact that the population disparity is really driving this. You don't want too few members on a school board, and you don't want too many. There is a sweet spot. Figuring out what the right number is and working backwards from there feels like a really good strategy. As far as number 3 goes, the fact that both existing school districts use that methodology feels like it's a path of least resistance in some way, so it feels attractive that way. I think that I'm interested to talk about the model, the 13 number. I'd also like to propose a 15 number, as well as 2 kind of targets to work backwards from. I feel like working backwards from the number that the people on this board feel like is a good number, it feels like a winning strategy.
Okay. Ginger.
So maybe this is just, again, more philosophical. I mean, I think if I lived in Montague and that we were contributing that kind of money to a school budget, like I get that point of view of 1 to 5 to Leiden. Like I think that's fair, and I get it. But I also think that the impacts are the same on each town. Like the proportions are the same, right? Like there's not a 5-time impact on Montague, even though the dollar amount, it's like the dollar amount might be more, but the percentage of the EQV or the percentage of the total town budget or will be similar to the town of Leiden or Bernardston. So, and I think generally towns agree, like we have the same purpose, which is right to educate our kids the best we can, as efficiently as possible, with our dollars. So I don't know. I'm just trying to think that through. I just wanted to say that out loud.
Greg.
Yeah, I really caution us in terms of trying to think this through on budgets. This is not the point. We're not looking at what towns are putting in terms of dollars. This is really about democratic representation, right? I mean, we really don't want to get started bogged down in, well, this town gives more money, therefore they should have more votes. This is not the point of this. It really should be about democratic representation.
Okay. I think one of the things I heard is people wanted to look at the population numbers by town again. So I could bring that up if that's of interest, or is that repetitive? So maybe
I think there was the other document around the model that you guys are proposing, the 13-seat model.
Yeah, so why don't I go right to that, Chris, because also given the time here. So this will be maybe a little bit much, but we'll give it a try.
And while we're doing that, I just wanted to add, Ginger brought up a really good point. I was looking at all of our average tax bills and average home values, and it is very similar between all the towns. So it is, that's an important factor to keep in mind as well.
Okay. Okay, so what we did was this was all sent to you, and this is an example of section 2 using a base document with track changes. And please understand, it's just a suggestion, but it's based on the 13 members. Okay, so I'll just walk through it and then we can talk. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. The 2 members Bernardston, 2 members Gill, 1 Leiden, 5 Montague, 2 from Northfield, and 1 from Warwick. There's no at-large here. It's 13 people, and that's how it's distributed. Okay. They all register in their town of residence, placed on a common ballot for all towns. People were making comment that they understand that's how district-wide works. A quorum is a simple majority. The committee, some of this is absolutely required. So you need to state the quorum language. You need to state this is a statute from where the authority and obligations of regional committees comes from, 71-16-16I. That's why you don't see any track changes to that. And then section number 4 is about the organization of the committee. So that when they're elected, there's a chair, there's a vice chair. We did add this updated language that the department likes to see about the treasurer and the secretary, who may be the same person but need not be members of the committee. This business about providing for calling district-wide meetings didn't understand that, and the school committee can call all kinds of meetings. So we, at least for now, struck that. And the chair appoints people to serve on subcommittees. The elections are district-wide. Number of committees members is 13, and the elections run so that there are always 13 members. We also took out this clause here about term limits because it seemed kind of peculiar, but it doesn't. That's just our first look at this. I've not seen that before, actually. And when the elections are held, and then with the vacancies filled by appointment of the select board and the remaining committee members from that town, and they act by a 2/3 vote to appoint somebody for the balance of the unexpired term, and then also suggesting that we consider this language here about this is something also that the department has expressed as a concern if you use district-wide elections, that the posting doesn't just go to the town where there's a vacancy. The posting goes to all the towns, even though they're not replacing a person or a seat. So that's the back of the envelope thing is here is 13 members. And we played around with some different options, about 11 members, about 8 members, tried to keep the number down a bit. This is not in any way to discount the concerns you've mentioned about town-based representation and so forth, or large committees or small committees, but this is just what we thought might be a starting place for section 2. So with that, I'll be quiet and let you guys talk.
So to summarize, this is number 3 from the previous discussion, and this is a proposal from Mars about the constituency of the board.
Yeah, I would more likely, I think a suggestion is, and what Mac and I talked about when we're getting ready for this meeting is to try to provide starting points for all of this rather than just jump into this without any kind of structure to speak from. So yeah, this is a suggestion. Yeah, and it is based on district-wide elections with residency requirements. Yeah. Jane. You're on mute, Jane.
Probably wish I'd stay on mute. When it comes to getting on the ballot, number 1, candidates will register in their own town of residence to be placed on the common ballot for all member towns. That would work if you were running an election strictly for the school committee. But I do not believe that it will work if you're going to be on the semi-annual November election for the state. Because they have their suggestions and requirements. And that's where the thing comes in about having to get nominations in each of the towns.
Okay, we can look at that.
I know that's how it works now in Pioneer.
Okay, thank you.
I'll volunteer that I had a discussion with a person in Montague who was interested in this topic, and he put some numbers into a spreadsheet and came up with essentially what your suggestion is here too, but it's slightly tweaked to a number of 15 total 6 Montague, 3 Northfield, 2
Wait, Chris,
Bridgeton.
could you slow down?
Yep.
Again? Sorry.
Could you go through the numbers, Chris, because we are jotting
Yeah.
that.
So that's 6 Montague, 3 Northfield, 2 Bernardston, 2 Gill, 1 Warwick, 1 Leiden.
Okay, thank you.
And the reason that this looked attractive is that if you look at all the balances, and then if you look at the percentage of seats versus percentage of population, and kind of look at where the imbalances lie, that this kind of is a sweet spot. And the other criteria, just to be clear about it, is to make sure that not one town has a majority of number of seats. So those are the two criteria. Try to find the least amount of disparity, and so that no one town has a majority. That's
a good point. And also something that Mac and I talked about with making it, you really want to protect the elephant in the room concept where one town can kind of carry the day.
Jay, if I could add something here.
Sure.
Chris just mentioned something that I don't remember hearing before. If we used either 1 or 4 as the and come up with 23 votes total school committee members, Montague would have 12. So Montague would have a majority votes on a committee of 23 if it were just done by the math for both 1 and 4.
Yeah,
So,
we're sort of looking at 3 right now, but yes,
I know. I just think that did not come up before.
Yeah. Okay. Catherine.
Thank you. And I've been listening to all the comments. And interesting, Chris, that was what I was jotting down myself for a 15 member board, because I thought that wasn't quite proportioned correctly for the town. So I'm supportive of that suggestion to make it 15. I'm supportive of either 3 or 5. I'm with Jane on not having to go to elections, district wide, to get the school committee members who in other districts, you're just not going to know who those, I mean, without campaigning. And also, as much as I like democracy, often you don't get people who might be qualified as you might with an appointed seats. So those are two of my points, and I'm going to continue to listen, but I'm going to add one other comment, which is about the no more than 2 consecutive terms. I've sat on a lot of boards, a school committee board many, many, many years ago, but many other boards, and having something where people can't stay on forever is really healthy, because there's a tendency, although you get experience and knowledge by being on a board for a long time, you also may not be open to changes that are going to be presented. And also, if your affiliations with board members to have a tendency to have you lean in a direction that is more favorable to people that you know. So 8 seems okay. I could go to 12 if that, if it was 3 consecutive 4-year terms, but I really do support that you have term limits. Thank you.
Matt.
Right. I have 2 things. A question just to clarify on Catherine's comment. Choice number 3 would require voting for school candidates across the district, right? So you would be voting for people who are not in your town, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so I know that this is, sort of the issue where it hasn't been drawn out for me. I'm not clear on, again, like what the requirements of a proportional representation and the math would be, right? So, I mean, from my perspective, we could do really very similar to what has been proposed in the 13, except for Gill, which would be at 1, and Warwick, Leiden, Gill, all having 1 rep, Bernardston 2, Northfield 2, and Montague 5. There's no greater difference than 1,661 people between their proportional representation in that, which is 10% of the overall district. So could that work? That 12-member board elected proportionally?
You don't want an even number on the board.
It would
Yeah,
not be
I-
ideal. I understand that.
Are
I'm just
you-
trying to figure out what the actual options are for us to consider here.
Yeah, so is your proportional model based on the first option for elections?
Right.
Okay. We'd have to look at the numbers on that, Matt. I can't give you a quick answer. You know, it seems like, you know, we talked about that earlier where, you know, Leiden, you've got to be within 10%.
The overall district population, right?
No, it's a little more involved than that, and I don't know if Mac is still
Yeah,
on.
can I just, what the law says, Matt, is that each school committee member must represent within 10% of every other school committee member. Represent population. So if
Yeah.
you represent 1,000 people, everybody else has to be within 10% of that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that that what I gave you will work inside that, but you know,
I
do it
don't-
over.
Yeah, I don't, maybe you can help me get my arms around this. If everybody has one person, right, to start with, isn't that what you suggested?
No, no, what I'm thinking about is 10% of the population is 1,661 people, right? So as long as each individual, each representative is not representing a different, like if Warwick is 1, there's 780 people in Warwick or something like that. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
So there's not more than a 1,661 person difference between their actual town population and what they're representing. And if you just continue that on down the line, so that works for those which are all underneath 1,661 very easily. Bernardston gets 2 because it is with 2 people is still actually within 1,661 persons difference, because twice 1,661 would be 3,300, etc. Right? And then you get to Montague and Northfield and Montague. This is just the same pattern that I'm doing here, using like this reference differential. That's how this was worked out. It seems as though this is, you know, the same type of math that Mac is talking about.
So Matt, are you wanting to use option number 1?
What I want to do is to make sure that this committee understands what is available for them to choose under option 1, because I've heard a lot of committee members talk about how they don't like voting for people from other towns.
No.
And this would solve that problem. And in fact, the numbers that I proposed also keeps Montague at less than a majority, which is another issue that we have wanted to make sure that we solve. It also, right, like, so there's like a number of things that are elegant about this.
There's nothing,
Why I think that it's a solution that needs to be considered seriously, and the actual mathematical possibilities should be presented and understood by the board.
We'll work on that. We'll have that for you next time.
Thank you.
Okay, lots of hands up. I think Tupper's hand's been up for a while.
Right. I put my hand up even before Matt said he didn't like voting, or that a lot of people don't like voting for people from other towns. I was imagining being faced with a ballot with people from 6 different towns, almost none of whom I'd ever heard of before, and not knowing what to do with that ballot. And it made me think much more fondly about the option number 5, about appointed members. We have in Gill voted recently to appoint our tax collector and our treasurer, who used to be elected. Because it's a small town, a small population of candidates for elected office, and because we've had over the years concern about election of people for important positions, money handling positions, that were not sometimes terrifically qualified. So I would be very comfortable recommending a system where the select board, I wouldn't think the school committee should be involved because we don't want them self-perpetuating, but having the select board appoint, or perhaps having a moderator nominate and the select board appoint the determined number of representatives on the committee. Voting for people in other towns I've never heard of, just, I mean, you talk about democracy, that's not democracy. You have no idea what you're doing. Either you don't do it or you just blindly, check boxes.
Okay, Chris.
Great. I just want to jump on what Matt was saying and add some specificity for Jay and Mac. I think that Matt brings up really kind of the best point is taking the qualities or strengths and weaknesses of each of these things aside, we should know what they are. And so if for those 5 methodologies that we have from the law, if we could have the kind of the minimum kind of model that satisfies each one as an example, I think that would be very helpful. Maybe it's 1 example or 2 examples per those things. That would be extremely helpful. I hear what Matt's saying on his analysis, but I also hear what Jane's analysis, and I think I don't want us to miss any of the nuance in the math. We should understand the math before we determine if it's good or bad. So that would be my recommendation. I think also with number 5, previously I've heard the Mars consultants mention that it's more of a thing for vocational schools, and I think it would be good to, if we could have some information about nearby districts. I heard somebody say that the Amherst School District uses number 5, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But it'd be good to have just more information. I think copying the text from the law is good, but it'd be really good to have the Mars consultants add in just some example under each one. Thank you.
Very good. I think Alan was next.
I'm intrigued by Matt's calculations and how he's arriving at that. So I would ask this. So there's a difference between representation and then how that representation happens. So I'm wondering if, let's say, one community wanted to have their 2 members, let's say they have 2 members, be appointed by the Board of Selectmen or whatever they wanted. And another community said, we want our 2 members on the ballot and voted. Could you have that that combination of you have the proper ratio for your representation, but how they get on there to fulfill those 2, 3, 5 slots could be specific to in our language, and then maybe everybody's happy because we're using the nuances and creating our own model, as long as it fits the 1 man, 1 vote obligation. Is that possible?
I'm not sure if, to be honest, Alan, I don't know if I followed that.
All right, I'll do it real short. let's say, Leiden says, we get 2 members or 1 member, whatever it is, let's say 2 members, and we're gonna have, in the regional agreement, the select board are gonna appoint those 2 members. And let's say Northfield says, okay, we get 3 members, and we're going to have an election in our community, for those 3 members. And then another town does it, however they want to do it for their town. So you end up with 15 or whatever that sweet spot number is. So you have the obligation of meeting the 1 man, 1 vote, but how they got there to represent their community was a little different from town to town.
Yeah, if what you're saying is that each town is going to have a different election process, I don't think that works.
Really? So one town couldn't say we're going to elect 3, they're on the ballot in our town, and another town can't say we're going to have we get 2 representatives and we're going to have the select board appoint those 2.
No, because then you're mixing the legal options here. You're using appointment for some towns and you're using an apportioned population method for another town. I'm not familiar with anything like that.
All right, that's unfortunate, but okay. I was
Well,
just trying to
we
think
nail
outside
that
the
down?
box.
Could we nail it down to make sure that that's not an option?
We can check on that.
So I am a lawyer, right? We have the statutory language. The statutory language is clear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you've described is not 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Okay,
So I'm like, I haven't done the case law research on it, right? But I'm like 90% certain that these guys are right on that one.
okay, thank you. Just trying to think outside the box.
It was a cool idea. I really liked it. We should change the law and make it work like that.
Okay, I'm just calling this back up again because we're really talking about this. We're not talking about the proposed section 2 from us. So we're in fact, it is 8 o'clock. And what I have from my notes is that at the next meeting, we're going to, we'll call it to order, we'll do the minutes. And after that, we are going to show a hypothetical model for each one of the statutory options for elections. Does that sound familiar?
I think that will be helpful.
And
Matt?
I haven't heard anybody show interest in 4 for the benefit of our consultants. Maybe we could show a clear consensus. We're not interested in fractional representation.
yeah, well, we can, if really nobody wants to see that, fine, but I don't want to rule it out if somebody's interested. The other thing is that some of these options we can work up an example, but some of these options have a lot of discretion in them, like the appointment method, right? I mean, you could have any kind of number that you wanted there.
Its attractiveness aside, the math for 4 is really simple to translate from 1 to 4.
Weighted votes are, I don't know, they work sometimes. I don't know if we could work up something for you about that.
Chris, you're right.
Jane,
I'll withdraw my comment.
Okay, so
Jane's had her hand up. I don't know. Jane, do you still have a comment?
no, I see your hand. Go ahead, Jane.
I just wanted to comment. I like what Matt had to say, but what he missed the last sentence that said to be put on the common ballot. So the vote would still go to all 6 towns.
Okay, well, in number 1, we'll organize this by the options in the statute, okay? And we'll come up with some numbers that seem reasonable.
I think we should write our own statute.
Yeah, there you go.
That might be in scope.
And in the short term, that sounds great. And the long term, I don't know. But
Well, Desi would just send it back.
Yeah, well,
Or maybe they would send it back with approval.
yeah. Send it back with a parking ticket.
Jay,
So we'll come up with that kind of a layout for you. And I think that'd be the substance of the conversation next time. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Jay, I would like to ask Matt again. I did do I understand that your goal was to try to not have district-wide election? Or
No,
is that?
no. My goal is to present the board, the subcommittee, with a concrete example of how option number one could work. So the smallest board number that
Right.
meets the
Right.
math requirements
Right.
was my goal.
Okay.
Because and that was in response to two comments that I've heard from the members of the subcommittee, and I could probably go by names if you want me to, but the two comments generally have been, we don't want a huge board, right? And there have been sub comments about folks having concerns about district-wide elections.
Yep.
And so my goal was to see if option one could meet
Right.
those concerns.
Yep. I got it.
Okay, and Tupper.
Right, in the effort to nail down absolutely that we can't combine these options, which is, I can understand, it's probably right. I do note that the statute that they come from begins a regional school district may, comma, by amendment to its regional school district agreement, comma, provide for one of the following options. And I'm wondering whether it's possible that in forming a new district, that language would not be applicable, and there may be more flexibility, perhaps somewhere else in the Massachusetts laws. I just note that to you.
I don't think Mac. I don't know. Mac maybe comment on that. Did you, Mac?
We've studied this quite a bit. I believe we were going to have to use one of these 5 options.
All right.
Okay, so I'll turn this back to Chris. Our next meeting is June 26th at the same time. And you can move towards adjournment if you so wish.
Yeah, I move to adjourn.
Oh, I just had a.
Nope. Okay.
I just want to point this out because I know we have an attorney, we have a couple of them here. I'm wondering when we get to a place like this that, and I'm following up on Tupper for a minute, we could hire or ask an attorney because this is a pretty critical decision point, and we wouldn't want to find out later we had an option. We could hire an attorney specifically to research the point if it is around we want to do a combination where you could elect or appoint or whatever, food for thought, hire an attorney, have them research this and conclusively say, actually, you do have some leeway if you want to modify this and still meet the letter of the law. So remember that we do have that at our disposal if we need that.
Okay, and I think Tupper, is this a new comment, Tupper?
No, I forgot to turn it off.
Okay, very good. You may want
So
to
moved.
you may want to structure that a little bit, Alan, so that you have a research question for the attorney if you choose to reuse them,
Okay.
So it's
Second.
Yeah.
Bye, guy.
Roll call vote?
Yeah.
Chris?
So the vote to adjourn the meeting, Tupper,
Yes.
I vote yes. Dorinda,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Ginger,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Alan.
Yes, with the understanding we have a June 26th meeting scheduled.
June 26th, 6:30 p.m.
Thank you. So that's a yes.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
you all. Good
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.